advice for the Nazis, it was decided that Hungary would be invaded, plans were drawn up, and it would be called Operation Marguerite. It was to take place in March of 1944. German troops massed along the borders under the guise of war maneuvers, and on March 19, 1944, the Germans had marched into Hungary proper.
Now, life in Budapest was quieted down because the King of Hungary, he did have a pact with Germany. They were allies, but he did not allow to be the Jewish, to take the Jewish people out into concentration camps. So actually it was very quiet in Budapest, and life was going on. We had Jewish organizations there, and we used to get together, and we had a nice Jewish temple, not far. I used to go to services sometimes, and we had dances, in the Jewish community, sort of a community center, and we had dates and going out, and on weekends, most of the time I used to go out. There was an island in Budapest which was called Marguerite Island, and on that island they used to have all kinds of activities. You could go skating, you could go swimming, you could go playing tennis or those kind of things, sports, or you could go dancing and take a boat ride. It was a lot of fun, and it wasn't too expensive. You could stay the whole day and, for little money and enjoy yourself. And life was going on pretty quiet until when it came March 19, when the Nazi Party became stronger and stronger, and they tried to overthrow the king. So Germany gave him the okay to start a revolution, and try to occupy all the radio stations and the police stations and so forth. And that's what happened. March 19, all of a sudden, they started, shooting was starting to go on. And they promised the Germans, as soon as this Nazi party is going to start the revolution, they're going to come in and help them out and to win. And that's what happened. There was maybe for 2-3 days a little shooting going on, and the Germans came in with the big tanks, and the Hungarians couldn't defend themselves. And they occupied the radio station and the police station and all the government places, and they took over Hungary. And then they were following the same laws as Germany. Well, as soon as we saw the German tanks and the German soldiers come in to help those Nazis, we knew that the Germans are going to take it over. And it was a sad thing to look at, because we knew that it's not going to be the same as it was before. As a matter of fact, as soon as they occupied, all of a sudden, they started to round up the Jewish people. They put them in a ghetto, and the younger people, they called into forced labor camps. And that's when I was called in, sometimes in May. I had to go to the forced labor camp.
Now, in addition to the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe divisions, which came into Hungary, Ernst Kaltenbrunner, the head of the RSHA, which was the security organ of the Nazi government, had SS units brought in after the regular combat troops entered. There were two units, one of them consisting of 500 to 600 Gestapo, SD, and SS men, was commanded by Hans Geschke. The other unit, made up of roughly 200 men, was commanded by Adolf Eichmann, who was in charge of the Jewish Affairs Office in the RSHA. This was the man who would implement the final solution in Hungary. In Eichmann's Sonderkommando were some of his most tried and experienced men. Dieter Wisłocki had deported Jews from Slovakia and Greece. Theodor Denica had deported Jews from France, Italy, and Bulgaria. Siegfried Seidel was the first commandant of Theresienstadt. Franz Novak was a tried transportation expert. There were other men, 16 in all, who would head the Sonderkommando, and these men would all work with the newly established pro-German government. The Germans now demonstrated their efficiency at implementing their plans and adapting to local conditions. Hungarian cabinet ministers, senior officials, and generals were replaced with pro-German Nazi stooges. Ernst Kaltenbrunner had Laszlo André appointed as Secretary of State, and Laszlo Baki as Undersecretary to the Minister of the Interior, an anti-Semite named Andor Jaros. Lieutenant Colonel Laszlo Ferenczy of the Hungarian Gendarmerie was appointed to head the ghettoization and deportation program for Jews of Hungary and the acquired territories. The plan was simple. It had worked before. Following the decrees of Heydrich from September of 1939, Jews were rounded up from the small villages and hamlets and put in larger cities where railroad lines or railroad junctions were located. Jews were taken out of the economic aspects of life around them. Their bank accounts were frozen, businesses were taken, they were starved, put on starvation rations, and forced to do various work, construction work, cleaning up streets, anything, until they were deported. Deportation occurred and they were taken to extermination camps where they were outright exterminated, or they were put to work where eventually they would die through ill treatment under forced labor in the camps and other institutions.
Well, right after March 19, I don't know, maybe a few days later, the government, the Nazi government, the Hungarian government, started to put in new laws against the Jewish people, not the Greeks. And I wasn't there more than about 3-4 weeks, because I was called in right away to the forced labor camp. Now, whatever happened after that, I really don't know, because I wasn't there. But while I was there, every day there were all kinds of new laws to get after the Jewish people.
It took the Germans less than a month to set up the ghettoization program. The Jews were officially being ghettoized on April 15th, which was the last day of Passover. And the first Jews to be put into ghettos were the Jews of Carpathia. The next Jews would be the Jews of Northern